Down to New Orleans, bringing Mike Haas, Saints radio voice, play-by-play voice of the New Orleans Saints on X at Mike Haas, C-O-M-M. Mike, how you doing, my friend?
I am doing fine. Busy day here. My office is in the Superdome, and we've got a Pelicans game tonight and Saints on Sunday. So it's been a while since we've been around this building for a significant period. So good to be here.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting you bring up the Dome, because we were just talking about that. Dan Campbell talked about how difficult it is, having been there for 5 years, just how difficult it is for an opponent to come into that building and play a football game. What is it about the atmosphere inside that Dome that makes it so hard on opposing teams?
Well, he was here when they were winning every week, right? And so they, 13-3 was like, all right, good year, way to go, right? So it's 2016 to 2020. He won 4 division titles, and it is a special building. It's been difficult the last really 3 years, 9-8, Sean's last year, and then Dennis, 7-10 last year, 5-6 at this point, and they have not really played well here in the last probably 3 years. So the crowd is just aching to cheer like they used to back in those days. So there just has not been a whole lot to kind of get excited about, and they're all noon games, and so people kind of roll in here late. But when it's up, and those times when Campbell was here and Aaron Glenn, man, it was nonstop from beginning of the game to the end. But they just haven't had fans haven't had the opportunity to get that excited recently.
Mike, glad to have you on the show here. Braylon Edwards, you talked about having something to be excited about. Well, it seems like there is one thing to be excited about, and that's receiver second year out of Ohio State, Chris Olave. It seems like it doesn't matter who's the quarterback playing in that particular game. He always finds a way to make catches, get first downs, and even score touchdowns. Talk about how good and how big Chris Olave has been paused in the last 2 years for the New Orleans Saints.
Well, he's just been huge. I mean, he was really, the only guy against Atlanta last week, 7 receptions and 114 yards at halftime, and he gets hurt in the second half. And so he's in concussion protocol right now. And, it's rare. We see it. Guys come back in that week span. But, he has been – it's funny because he's such a – he's so open sometimes. You're like, how are you guys not guarding Chris Olave? Because he was a kind of a third down machine last year, and again, 63 receptions. He's just been the guy, especially when you lose a Mike Thomas. He's just been very, very dependable.
Talking to Mike Haas, play-by-play radio voice of the New Orleans Saints. Let's stick with that offense for a minute, Mike. What is the talk down there in New Orleans about this offense? Just looking at, I think 7 of the 11 games this year, 20 or less. This offense has just not been clicking at all. Is that a little surprising down there?
Yes, because I think expectations were really high, and until really the last 2 weeks, they have not been hammered by injuries like some teams. I mean, the last 2 weeks they have, but prior to that, they had their receiving core, they had their running backs, and it's really just inside the 20s. And so they have struggled so much in the red zone. I use you guys as an example. You have the second best offense out there. You have sort of 27 points a game. The Saints have been in the red zone more than the Lions. Wow, that's impossible, right? We've been there 40 times. The Lions have been there 38, but we don't cash in, right? And so field goals versus touchdowns, never. In the last 2 weeks, the Lions have attempted 0 field goals. We've attempted 7. And so it's not that they have not moved the ball. That's why their numbers offensively, look strong. But when they get down inside the 20, it is, 0 for 5 last week in Atlanta. 0 for 5? That's, and now I think it's become a little mental because it's been such a week-to-week issue. Last week was a little different because it wasn't just that you didn't score, you turned it over in the red zone twice, and one was a pick 6. And, it's just, that's a momentum changer that's hard to return. So offensively, between the 20s, pretty strong. But if they can't find a way to put it in the end zone, they're very, very easy to beat.
I want to ask you about two players real quick. You talk about inside the red zone, and we were talking about Chris Olave, a Big Ten guy. Here's another Big Ten guy, Juwan Johnson out of Penn State. Is he a guy that the Detroit Lions might have to expect them to run some plays for in the red zone? Because he is definitely starting to catch on in that tight end position because he was a wide receiver coming out of college.
Yeah, he's got skills that I don't think you can teach because he was a wide receiver. I've been a huge Juwan Johnson fan. And so I think he's a guy that should be targeted more in the red zone. I mean, they picked up Jimmy Graham, and he hasn't even been active. So, Juwan caught 7 touchdowns last year. He's only caught 1 this year. But he is a guy in the red zone. I mean, the Saints, to me, are almost, when you had Mike Thomas and Jimmy Graham and Juwan Johnson and Alvin Kamara and Taysom Hill, you should be a strong red zone team. And so, yeah, I think Juwan should be one of those guys that they need to connect with in the red zone.